Welcome to Campfire, a place for sharing wisdom and guidance on the journey of life. I'm Ed Woodstock, and today's talk is about cultivating inner peace. Are you interested in cultivating inner peace? Why? And what does it mean exactly? Cultivating. I think of soil, the land, of farming, of growing something. And so if we want to cultivate something, we have to create the right conditions, or at least understand them. Understand the weather, the climate, the soil, the seeds, the seasons, the rainfall. And if we cultivate the soil properly and cultivate the plants that we're growing, if we understand the dynamics required for healthy cultivation, we can intentionally work with these materials to grow something nourishing, something that is of substance and sustenance. And the word inner implies the work is within, not without. And the word peace, what is peace for you? Is it a release from stress? A relief from suffering? An acceptance of the way things are? A feeling of contentment, satisfaction? And what is peace for you? So understanding that cultivating inner peace implies working with specific materials for the yielding of some sort of nourishing result of attaining peace within one's soul, within one's experience. Cultivating inner peace can be a wonderful way to understand the variables involved in what it means to practice working with the materials necessary to achieve a certain state or feeling or a quality of experience within oneself. And why do you want to experience inner peace? It almost implies as if there is a lack of that, a lack of nourishing sustenance within. Maybe it's chaotic, maybe it's hectic, maybe it's violent, sad, depressed, anxious, confused, nihilistic, vengeful, angry. Maybe there's all these chaotic themes within oneself that is not peaceful. Hence the desire to cultivate inner peace. I would say, with the rare exception of someone that just really enjoys being in a state of suffering, which some people are addicted to their suffering, most of us want to achieve some kind of peace in our hearts, in our souls. So the basic understanding of how to cultivate inner peace and using metaphors like the land can be helpful for us to understand how we can create these things in an unseen environment. It's not the same as planting a seed and dropping it in the soil. It's something we can't really see, as the work is inside of us. So how do we acknowledge the materials that we're working with? Well, we have to sit with those materials. And in this case, the landscape is the inner landscape. And what does the inner landscape look like? What is it like now in your heart compared to what you would like it to be like? What is your inner landscape mostly comprised of? Is it more like a junkyard or a busy city or a chaotic zoo that needs to be organized and restructured? That's possible. And we can do that. But when we understand it metaphorically and we can visualize what our inner landscape is like, chaotic, hectic, violent, confusing, scary, and we want to change that and cultivate a different landscape within us. I don't know that there is more important work to be done. It seems like an extremely beautiful and worthy goal to explore what it could be like to create a new landscape within oneself. And so when we think about the current landscape, if we sit with it, we can ask ourselves, what are we feeling most of the time? What does that inner voice, that inner monologue tell us mostly? Is it negative? Is it afraid? Is it angry? Is that inner landscape, does it involve a voice that speaks to oneself with contempt, hatred, violence, confusion? And is the inner voice much more like a critic that is tyrannical and something that just doesn't feel nourishing, doesn't feel healthy, supportive, encouraging? And how do we then change that aspect of our inner landscape? Well, one of the things we can do is simply to observe it. And if we can imagine that there are parts of our inner landscape that we don't like let's say it is like a junkyard. Let's say it does have some rusty, old, toxic, leaky, unhealthy, old things scattered around. How can we dismantle some of the toxic elements of our inner landscape? Well, first we can acknowledge them, going to that part of ourselves and taking an assessment of what's inside of us and removing that. We can also change it if we want. We can recognize that some of the things in our inner landscape that we don't want there, that can be blocking us or preventing us from cultivating this soil within us, can be shifted or moved. And how do we shift and move things? Well, we have to acknowledge that they're there first. And if we acknowledge that they're there, we can work with it. We can dissipate it. If we acknowledge that maybe a toxic element in our inner landscape is some anger or some anxiety or some frustration, some fear, some sadness, by simply working with these things, we can break them up a bit. And almost as if we are putting something on them to dissolve them or to lift them, sort of like you would lift a stain or put something on it to break it up and make it less dense. And the feelings that we have inside of us are of that nature, where if we take the time to take an assessment of what we're feeling inside, if it is something negative, the simple act of observing and acknowledging what we're feeling can really break it up in a beautiful way. If we can acknowledge our sadness and spend some time with it to allow it to be felt, that is a process, sort of like a chemical process, where the acknowledgement of that sadness and the energy and the attention that we're putting on that sadness to feel it, to allow ourselves to feel the feeling. By the felt sense of the feeling, we actually are changing the relationship we have with that feeling. And we're allowing ourselves to feel it and allowing it to flow through. And as it flows through, it can break up and be released. It doesn't have to stay stuck in your inner landscape, clogging it up and preventing you from cultivating something else on that space. If there's fear, if there's anger, if there's frustration, or if there's an angry critic that's always barking negative things at you, making you feel bad, observe that inner critic acknowledge its existence. Feel what needs to be felt. Maybe it's the frustration of allowing yourself to be spoken to by this inner critic. And feel the frustration that needs to be felt. And as you feel what needs to be felt and hear this voice of the inner critic and realize that it is not a helpful voice. It's not a voice that you want as part of this new inner landscape. Then you feel what needs to be felt. And as you feel it, allow it to be felt in the body and allow it to dissipate. And this may require that you need to cry or to just feel heavy emotions. And that's okay. They're just feelings. And it's okay to confront them. And as you recognize these feelings and allow them to flow through you, this space inside of you will open up a bit. And the key aspect of creating a landscape of inner peace is as we feel the feelings that need to be felt and let these heavier negative emotions be felt, to dissolve, to break up, to flow through us, we come into a place of acceptance. See, that is essentially the key, is to bridge the gap between how we're feeling we want things to be and what the reality of the way things are is. When we suffer, it's primarily as a result of we have this idea of the way we want things to be, and then we have the reality of the way things are. And the difference between those 2 points of the way that we want them to be and the way that they are, in that gap is suffering. So we can bridge that gap and we can find a way to come into this deep acceptance by simply tending to the feelings we have and learning to deeply accept the way things are. We can clear and cultivate this inner landscape and prime it and plant the seeds of peace and health and well-being, of being grounded, of feeling secure, confident, and comfortable within one's own body and soul. When we recognize that this is a power that we have all the time, but the reason that we don't feel inner peace all the time is because we're avoiding facing the uncomfortable feelings, it can be a revelation. It can be a revelation that we have been confused our whole lives, thinking that in order for us to feel something good inside, we have to somehow change things outside of us. And that's not true. If we're feeling a feeling, the feeling is within us. And yet we run around most of our lives trying to change things outside of us in an attempt to try to feel something different inside. But if the feeling is inside of us, changing the outside will only exhaust us and waste our time and energy. That doesn't mean that you can't interact with the world in a way where you can go out and do things and explore the world and be ambitious and live with purpose and experience all the things of the physical world. But where some people often get misguided is thinking that if they change the outer world, it's going to change the way they feel inside. And that's just not true. If the feeling is coming from within us, it is our responsibility to change from within. And so if we want to cultivate inner peace, we have to remind ourselves that we have to clear the space from some of the things that we've been holding on to, possibly for years, even decades. There might be things blocking our inner landscape that have been there since childhood. And so the reason it's difficult to cultivate inner peace is because it requires that we confront some uncomfortable truths and feelings that have been resonating inside of us for a long time sometimes. And that sounds simple, because it is simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple to understand that we need to confront the difficult and challenging emotions inside of us, but it's not easy to do. As a matter of fact, most of us avoid feeling our feelings most of the time. Most everything we do is to numb and distract ourselves from feeling the truth of what we're feeling. Most of the things we do to pour some booze on things, or take a hit, or have that orgasm, or win that thing, or make that money, or reach that status, or get that fame, or all the things we do to numb and distract ourselves from feeling those uncomfortable feelings are the very things that block our inner landscape from experiencing inner peace. So if we can take the time to show up at this plot of land, this chaotic scene, this space that has a lot of things that are blocking, the space that we want to have something different at, a different experience, a different relationship, and to grow something nourishing, we first must clear that space and confront the uncomfortable feelings. We then need to recognize the disparity between the way that we want things to be and the way that they are, bridge that gap, and create that space in which we are in acceptance and surrender, letting go of the things that don't belong there, and creating a space of acceptance. And from there we can plant the seeds. Planting the seeds could simply look like radical acceptance. It could look like planting the seeds of accepting responsibility for one's behaviors and actions. It could mean planting the seeds of change. It could mean planting the seeds of love by making a different choice about how we speak to ourselves. It could mean planting the seed of forgiveness for our past transgressions, or forgiveness for someone else that has wronged us, and letting go of that. That can clear some of our land as well. And so then in the space that we've cleared, and in the space that we've accepted, and we've looked at all the variables required, we start planting these seeds of acceptance, responsibility, accountability, forgiveness, compassion, kindness, understanding, connection. And so what do you want to grow in this garden? As you're cultivating inner peace, what else do you want to plant? What other nourishing seeds do you want to plant that will one day bear fruit as you tend to the soil every day and watch these saplings and seedlings grow and flourish and blossom and bloom into something beautiful? It's your garden. You can create whatever you want. You can grow whatever you like. There's no rules. You can create and cultivate a garden of inner peace, wellness, health, forgiveness, adventure, exploration, connection, creativity, self-expression. All the things that you want to experience. But just remember, if you want to plant those seeds, we got to clear that land first and understand what we're working with. So be gentle with yourself in the process. Clearing some of those heavy machines off the land, some of the toxic, leaky, the heavy machines that we don't use anymore, that we don't need anymore, that are broken and don't serve us. We need to confront them and get rid of them. Let them go. It's time. So I'm curious to know, what do you plan on growing in this inner garden as you cultivate inner peace? Leave a comment in the section below. And if you're curious to learn more about how to let go specific things, what it means to practice radical acceptance, and take responsibility for clearing the land, the inner landscape within you. Or if you're curious to know about the process of setting goals and intentions for planting seeds and what kind of nourishing fruit they could potentially bear. If you want to work with me one-on-one, you can find a link for my Calendly in the comment section below, pinned to the top, or you can visit edwoodstock.com and learn more about what it means to understand our inner landscape and cultivate inner peace. So please do all the things: like, subscribe, share this video with somebody you think might benefit from its message. And I hope to catch you guys next time and tune into our next episode of Campfire.